Welcome to another camera channel. Today, it's a different type of video. Yes, today is a different type of video, and it's probably a long video. I don't know yet because I haven't edited it down, but I hope you enjoy this kind of video. I kind of thought we'd just have a chat about multiple topics instead of different topics, like one video for each different topic, because sometimes one topic doesn't really deserve a whole video. So I thought, why not just, put a bunch together? And this idea isn't mine. A friend of mine, Tim from The Elusive Frame, is doing a series on his channel where he'll just sit down every week and he's going to talk about something and kind of keep it unedited, kind of uncut. And that's a challenge for him. And I thought, well, why not give it a go myself? And I think he's doing his with tea. I think he's drinking tea. I'm going to drink this today, which is some kind of Korean ale. Don't worry, I'm not trying to be relatable YouTuber number 500 or anything by trying to pick something very specific like coffee or whiskey or something that I'm going to review or something like that. This is just something for me to drink while I talk so I don't get too bored myself. Not that I'm going to try and be boring, but yeah, something for me to drink anyway. So there's so many things that have been happening recently. I think let's call it Techtober. I don't think this is only limited to October, but I think so many new things have come out recently, which definitely interest me. And I'm sure they interested a lot of you guys too. At this time of year, there's just so many new things. It's really hard to kind of keep up with them and also kind of decide which ones are worth buying or investing into. Because we get these kind of refresh of technologies kind of like every year or whatever. We get like new cameras sometimes from certain companies. And sometimes they're only little incremental improvements. Sometimes they make like huge leaps and it's like the new, hit item that everyone wants. Sometimes it's new frame rate options or new resolutions and stuff like that. So this year has been very interesting. And I want to focus on two areas, mainly what I'm interested in. One is Mac. So Apple released some new MacBook Pros with new chips. And then lighting. So Aperture have brought out a bunch of new stuff, which is very interesting. It's kind of shaken up, I think, the ecosystem in a way. Like trying to recommend lights to people who don't have any lights or they all have some lights and they want to buy some new lights. These new units have really changed what we can recommend to people now. So I don't have access to any of them because they've only just come out. Well, some of them are already out, but yeah, it's very interesting. So let's go to the Mac side. Okay, so so Apple have brought out two new chips. You've got the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. And if you're familiar with the M1 chips, that kind of came out last year. We have an M1 Mac Mini. I love it. It's great. Positive points to that, it was cheap. Just over $1,000 for the 16 gigabyte version. Kept the SSD size small. Because we mainly use external hard drives or external SSDs to kind of work off, which kind of regret it in a way because I kind of have to keep clearing space off the Mac Mini in stuff like documents or downloads. And even in the applications, I've had to uninstall some applications sometimes to make space for other things. So I kind of regret having the 256 gigabyte version. The 512 would have been much better. In terms of being able to just keep a lot of stuff without having to data manage and stuff. I don't usually work off the Mac Mini directly. I'm always using external SSDs. But yeah, if I would go back in time, I'd probably get the 512 gigabyte version of the Mac, of the M1 Mac Mini. But these new M1s, the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, are way faster than what we have here now. So very interesting, and the price isn't actually that bad, I don't think. Anyway, the new models that have come out or have been released to come out are like MacBook Pros, and they've gone back to older kind of design styles. So I don't know if it was called the unibody design at the time, but the actual shape of the laptop reminds me of a very old MacBook, which is kind of cool. But the main cool point is we've got ports back. We got full-size HDMI, we got an SD card reader on the side, which is awesome because I've been using a 2015 MacBook Pro Retina, back when they were called Retinas. And I've been struggling with that one because if I'm away from the studio where the M1 Mac Mini is, trying to work or do anything with B-roll on this older machine, the render times are just stupid. I think I'm trying to even render like a 7-minute clip with some effects on, a bit of sharpening and stuff like that, grade, and it was quoting like 2 hours or something like that, or two to 3 hours just for this short clip, and it was nothing complicated at all. But so I decided not to render it on the MacBook at that time, and made the decision to come back to the studio just to offload the footage and render it on the M1 Mac Mini, and it took 50 minutes. So it was like, wow, this is crazy, the time difference in rendering time. So I really love the M1 Mac Mini. But now compared to these new ones, wow, super amazing because they're so much faster. So I think the M1 Pro is maybe at least twice as fast, or at least it's double the size of the GPU, and the M1 Max is double that. So it's like, I guess, 4 times faster than the M1. And we've got some cool specs with the, I think DaVinci Resolve updated their own software. So I think they're, on 17.4 now? And it's maybe optimized for the new chips, this new version at least. And there were quotes of like 5 times faster. I don't know if that's in comparison to like the old, or to the M1. But that is a significant like boost. And today, a lot of the tech YouTubers have got their new MacBooks and stuff. So they got M1 Pros, M1 Max, and they've been comparing them. And just in between those two, the M1 Max is like just over double the speed of the M1 Pro, at least in Final Cut Pro renders. So that's like super cool to see. I'm all about saving time. Sometimes after doing a lot of interviews and stuff and having to render all that out to a client so they can edit it, so they can give it to their editor or whatever, sometimes I've waited like 24 hours plus for a bunch of interviews to render, which is crazy. So I think the time savings alone is worth the higher price tag here. So also we got to think that the price difference between the M1 Mac Mini and, let's say, a spec'd out, the one I would want would be the M1 Max, MacBook Pro 16-inch, 4 terabyte SSD with the 64 gigabytes RAM. That runs here like 6.6 million won. I'll put the US price here if I can find it, so you can have a comparison. But the time savings alone, so I think how much my time is worth if I don't have to wait for a render. And yeah, I could sleep, right? I could leave these renders running overnight, but if it's a tight deadline or whatever, when I'm rendering on a machine, I can't use that machine for anything else. So the time savings alone, having faster chips, is probably worth it for me, especially if I'm gonna get the longevity out of this machine I've had from my previous Macs. I think that's really good, right? 5 years, 6 years, something like that. I think it's worth it. It's like $1,000 a year or whatever. So yeah, I think it's worth it. I definitely want to pick one up. Definitely will take advantage of that 12-month financing that they offer. So yeah, that's one of my plans will be to upgrade my old MacBook Pro to a new one. So looking forward to that. They're not available here yet for some reason in South Korea, if you didn't know where I am. So yeah, that's what I think about the whole Apple and the M1 MacBook Pro situation. Moving on. So what else have we got? Lights. Yes, Aperture have been releasing new lights. And I was kind of thinking maybe the main topic of this video would be like what lights I would recommend for people to get. But I didn't really want to dedicate a whole video just to that thing. I mean, I might do it in the future if I can get my hands on the units. This is the thing, I can't get my hands on any of these units yet because, one, they're not out. They're kind of in pre-order status and they've only really just been announced. So what I'm talking about are the P60X, P60C, which are these panel lights. So the P60C is RGB W, something like that, or RGBWW. Maybe there's, yeah, I think it's like a mini Aperture Nova, like P300C. So it's like a smaller version of that. And then the P60X is a bicolor panel. which is slightly smaller than the P60C because it has more chips in the P60C, so it needs to be a bit bigger. And the reviews have been really good from the people who have had access to them for the embargo release, and they really like them. And there's two other lights which came out, which was like the Amaran 60D and Amaran 60X, I believe. Not to be confused with the Lightstorm 60D and 60X, which are like kind of Fresnel style little spotlight lights. I guess you can call them like dado kind of style lights. So they have these, and previously they announced, I think at the start of the year, it was like the 100D and 100X, 200D and 200X. So they have all these really cheap lights in this kind of Amaran line, and looking at comparisons that people have done, the output of these lights is meant to be the same or more as some of the Lightstorm lights. So we're talking the 120D Mark II and the 300D Mark II. Now I have two 120D Mark IIs here, one 300D Mark II, and I also have a 600D Pro. Oh, I forgot they even announced like a 600D, 600X Pro, and they announced intentions for their 1200D. I don't know if they like actually confirmed that that's good, what's it's going to look like and everything, but I think they did this with the 600D as well. At one point, they showed it, and then they kind of redesigned it over time. So they got all these new lights coming out, and I know there were complaints like over time, like Aperture used to be kind of like, oh, we're really budget friendly, we're really like we're kind of like indie filmmaker kind of people, and then their models started getting progressively larger and more expensive, and people were complaining like, oh, we need more budget options, we need more budget options. And they kind of got up to that 600D, 600X, and then they went back to this Amaran line, which is the budget options. And from what I can tell, I know I can buy the 100D and the 200D and the X versions of those, which are the bi-color versions of those here at the moment, but the price is kind of high, so I don't really feel the need that I would actually need them. But from what I can tell from the output, they are as high or as equivalently bright as some of the fixtures already. So the 100D is meant to be as bright or brighter than the 120D Mark II. And then the 200D is meant to be as bright or brighter than the 300D Mark II, according to some people who have reviewed them. And which is kind of, I mean, I guess it's plausible because, you know, LED technology gets better, so maybe they're more efficient, so they don't need as much power draw. And the names are based off power draw, right? Or power draw / output. So I guess if the chips are better, you could have a 200 watt chip, which is brighter than a 300 watt chip, I'm guessing. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but that's my understanding of it. These budget lights are way cheaper, but they're somehow brighter. And I'm guessing that's because technology is getting better over time. The other reason why they're cheaper is that these are made of plastic compared to the Lightstorm line, which is all like metal, more suited to more like on-set, rental house kind of stuff. They can take a bit of a beating, where these cheaper ones, not saying that you couldn't use them on a film set or a shoot of some kind, because everyone does different types of work, so I wouldn't see a problem using them on interviews. You know, if you're going and doing interviews for someone and you're on the lower end of the scale in terms of money or whatever, even if you're not, maybe, you know, these lights, it's more about what output you can bring, really, you know, how you can adapt to a situation. So I would say if these lights are as bright or brighter than some of their more expensive counterparts, is the person who's paying you money really going to care? Did they look up in the lights and know how much they cost? No, they only really care about how it looks, right? I mean, they may have some kind of preconceptions about how some of these light units are meant to look, maybe. But if you're working for people like that, you know, who knows? Maybe they're not the best people to work for. But, you know, or maybe they can just pay you more so you can get better lights. Not even saying that those lights are even any worse than the more expensive counterparts, right? So, again, I haven't had access to them, so I haven't been able to test them. But from what I can tell, or for what my standpoint of it is like output is the thing that matters. if you're going and trying to do an interview somewhere and the background is very bright for some reason, and you need to balance that out with a bit more powerful key light, which is why I started getting, like, first I got the 300D Mark II because the 120D Mark II wasn't bright enough. And then I got that, and then I went into situations where that wasn't bright enough. So I went for the 600D, right? So output is more important, I think, especially when you start running it through different types of lighting modifiers and things like that. So output versus price. If these ones are brighter, then they're more expensive counterparts, then why not, right? But I guess it really depends on what kind of work you do and what your intentions are doing with the light, right? I'm assuming you can rent out those, but maybe they get more damaged more easily. But this brings me back to the point of like what lights to recommend, right? So for the longest time, when we had the 100D Mark II, the easy option was, oh, you want a cheap budget light, Godox SL60W. Everyone loved that light. It was the 120D Mark II killer. That was the very popular YouTube title for many people. And I've got a bunch. Well, I got two. And then the Y version as well, which is the tungsten or yellow version of that one. And they're good. I would say it's about like a 75% of the 120D in terms of output. Maybe it's a little bit closer, but you know, it's definitely not as bright, but it's a budget version. It was way cheaper at the time. There were some fan issues. You know, they had very loud fans, but then you could do the whole fan swapping hack, which I did. And yeah, they're great. Typically use them in the studio just for like backlights, and they can just kind of sit at the back of sets and just live there. I never take them down and do anything else with them because I have access to different lights. But it was the go-to recommendation for anyone who wanted a Bowen mount style key light. That's what you would always say. Okay, how much money can you spend? Can you spend $150? Up to $200 if you want to put a modifier on it and get a stand, hopefully. Maybe it's around $200 for that. Then you'd say, get that light. It's good enough to start off with, right? So I'm sure thousands and thousands of YouTubers or people doing YouTube are using those lights. And if you probably got a light before then, it was the 120D Mark II. But now in 2021, is it a good recommendation anymore? I don't really think it is. The price hasn't really changed on it. It's still around the $130 mark, right? Something like around there, I think. I would have to check. But you have these new aperture lights now, which are like, I think the new 60D, the Amaran one, is like 150, maybe 200. And then the 100D as well, similar price, around $200 mark. And the good benefit, well, more than one, but the benefits about these lights is that because they're in the Aperture ecosystem, we have access to the Sidus Link app, which is really fantastic. And obviously, if you get more lights in the future, they will be Sidus Link compatible as well. So you get access to the effects and other things, and just remote, options like that. Where the SL60W, you don't have those options. It's basically just on or off, and the remote's not very good. And you limited to just the knob on the back. So, I would say recommendation-wise, again, I haven't touched these 60Ds or 60Xs at all, the 100D or 100X or 200D, 200X. So I haven't used them. So this is purely going off by what the specs are and what other people have said. But I would say that getting into the Aperture ecosystem is probably the better idea. Instead of spending similar or maybe slightly less money on a third-party brand which doesn't have the same kind of app and ecosystem and support that you'd get. Aperture is just a more well-rounded company, I feel. They've done a fantastic job at getting into this market, and they have a fantastic YouTube channel. They're doing all these like teaching videos about how to set up lights and all that kind of stuff, which is great. And you don't really see that from another company. For example, let's say Godox or Godox. You don't see that kind of content from them. They don't have the kind of personality like in the market or, you know, or whatever, or in the sphere of all the other tech influencers, right? Nanlite is another company. I don't really feel that they have that same social presence that Aperture do. Probably to their detriment. I feel that maybe there's a little bit of a divide. There's the people who go with the Nanlite stuff and there's people who go with the Aperture stuff. I would say there's more people using Aperture products than there are Nanlite. And, you know, make of that what you will. I'm not saying that either one is better, but I kind of am. Aren't I? I am kind of saying that Aperture is better. I did rent some Nanlite lights before to kind of compare them, or try to compare it against the. I think I rented a Nanlite Forza 500, and then I think I rented the 600D when it first came out in the rental shops, and I was gonna do a video comparing the two. I didn't, but I rented it and I filmed it. I filmed a B-roll at least, and the 600D was way brighter, you know. So I was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's kind of obvious. A 500 versus a 600, of course, it's going to be brighter. But like the Nanlite ecosystem, I don't even know if they have an app. Do they have an app? Like, let me know in the comments if they actually have an app, because if they do, they either don't talk about it very much or it's not well supported, which is a shame, you know. The expectations, I guess, going to these brands now, these companies, is that people want these lights and they want apps to go with them, not just controllers and stuff like that. So that's another thing to think about too. So in terms of recommendations for lights, definitely I would say get into the Aperture ecosystem. They do a lot of lights for different situations, different price points. I have a few MCs. How many do I have? 3? I have 3 MCs. I have a couple of I have 4 B7Cs, but I hardly ever use them, to be honest. I feel that they're not bright enough, or they're not right for the applications that I usually typically need lights for. So these new Amaran lights, definitely you should be checking those out. If you watch Aperture's live stream about the 60D and 60X, and the P60X and P60D, no, P60C. God, these names are really annoying to say. They do some cool examples where they're showing just setting up like typical YouTuber setups using just those lights, which is kind of cool. And they also talk about price as well. So they're like, oh, this setup costs like $800 or whatever, because they've used, you know, 2 P60Cs and then like one of the 60D or 60X as a key light or something like that. So definitely check that out, because that's really useful in terms of information and stuff. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think the 60, that the smaller ones, the 60s, are going to be like 75% or 67% worth, or the output of the bigger one, the 100s. As far if that's correct, might not be correct. So I guess check the stats and everything. But they're cute little things. Little box design. I don't know why they kept comparing it to a Komodo. I mean, I get it, right? It's similar size to a Komodo, but I don't care, because I don't use a Komodo to light. So it's not like I'm throwing a Komodo on a light stand and using that as a size guide for like a light size. I kind of didn't really resonate with that part. You know, I've touched a Komodo, but like, how many other people know how big a Komodo is, right? So I guess they're really specifically niching that fact to people, but I didn't really get it at the time. But they kept mentioning it over and over again. It's the size of a Komodo. Yeah, I don't care. Just tell me how bright it is. Bright, I want to know how bright it is. I want to know price. And the prices are reasonable. So I would say, depending on how much money you've got, go for these little Amaran lights. And it really also, on the flip side, it kind of depends on what kind of camera you're using, like what kind of lens you're using. If you're cool with shooting at like 2.8 or lower, then you can obviously get one of these cheaper lights, because the output is not going to matter as much. If you're stuck with an older lens, not older lens, what am I saying? A lens which is not as, the aperture doesn't open as much. So let's say a kit lens like 3.5 to 5.6, that kind of range. Then you're going to need a bright light. or you need to bump the ISO up. So there are different ways to work around it, but like if you're going for a cheap budget light, get into the aperture range and see how much money you can spend. Obviously, the more power you get, it's going to be better for you in terms of the situation you can use it in. So really depending on what kind of content you make. If you make content just for yourself, you're just a YouTuber, you sit in a room or a studio or set that you put up in your house, or you semi-permanently leave up in your house or whatever, then you can, just work out how much money you want to spend, and maybe you can get a less powerful one, maybe, potentially. If you're trying to use these lights for outside work or work with variable or changing conditions, so maybe you need to go and film in a bar which has majoritively tungsten lights or yellowy lights, then maybe a bicolor version is going to be better, because then you can kind of tune your key light to match the background, or to at least lessen the color difference between the background and your key light. Because sometimes, if you know, using the D versions of any of these, they're always like 5,600 Kelvin, right? But sometimes the other lights in the room, if they're overly strong or way shifted over to another side, sometimes your image doesn't look that good. And there are obviously going to be ways to kind of control that, or help control that, or mitigate that difference. But yeah, maybe a bicolor version would be better. But if you get a bicolor version, the output's going to be less. So if you want a 100D, but you're like, oh, maybe I should get a bicolor version, now I would say get the 200X, because then you'll have similar output I would get, say, to a 100D, but over the range. So yeah, that would kind of be my recommendation. But now here's the thing. I don't know what Aperture's coming up with next. Everyone thinks it's going to be tube lights. Now, they're hinting at it. They're heavily hinting at that it's going to be tube lights. Everyone's been asking about tube lights for a very long time. Now, would I use tube lights to key? Probably not. But if you wait a little bit of more time, you may want to opt for like spending your money on some different kind of lights that you can have in the background, and you can rely on more natural light for your key light, right? Or a different type of light. Or maybe you already have a key light and you're looking for other lights. Tube lights from Aperture would be amazing. I'd be very, very, very interested in that, because something which is Sidus Link compatible, and hopefully they don't hold back on us. If they make it like pixel control, so we kind of seen a hint of this with their, oh yeah, they had a new one, right? They had the P600C, which is like two 300Cs, two Novas like stuck together. That had like kind of pixel control, where they had like 4 sections. So I guess each panel was split up in 2, giving 4 different color controllable sections. Now imagine a tube light from Aperture with like 8 or 10, maybe 12 or 16, depending on how big these tubes will be, controllable pixels. So you can have that kind of fire effect. So I'm thinking like Astera tubes right now, right? That would be game changing. That, like, I don't want to slip into cliches about like, oh, everything's game changing. Wow, amazing. But I think that would be so good, because it's something that Aperture haven't done. And I believe they did it out of respect, either respect or they had some kind of deal with someone. Because Quasar Science is Astera, right? I'm pretty sure Astera is from Quasar Science, but I think they've been taken over by a different company. And there were tube lights from an Aperture sister company, or a company under the umbrella which owns Aperture, but they were only allowed, or they were only selling these tube lights in China, something like that. And they've been around a while. And you kind of look it up on YouTube. If you put in like I think Aperture RGB tubes or something, there'll be some kind of videos with Chinese titles. And And they're kind of like, oh, this is like Sidus, or maybe actually better to search Sidus Link RGB tubes. And there'll be some videos of people using these tubes which are being controlled by Sidus Link, right? But I think they were definitely being sold on AliExpress at one point. I never bothered ordering them because they were super expensive, or at least expensive enough that I was like, no, I'm not buying into this company, these products, which I don't even know the longevity of them, right? I don't know how long they'd be compatible with SizeLink or whatever, right? Even though they're from like similar companies, but who knows what the future is going to hold. And it looks like the Aperture are going to bring out their own version. Hopefully it's better than what we saw from the other company, because they were kind of just like one color, you know. I can't remember the name of the Godox ones. Godox tubes. What are they called? Because Godox also have these tube lights. Can't remember the name, but they have them now. And I believe they do have one which might have some kind of pixel control. Maybe. Maybe not. But seeing as other companies are already doing it, it would be great if Aperture did that. I'm sure most people will be fine if they did release tubes which just had one color in them, and effect and things like that, and it was SizeLink compatible and all that kind of stuff. But I think if they really want to jump ahead, they need to do the pixel control on those RGB tubes. I think that'd be beautiful if they did that. And maybe they could just offer a budget version of the tubes which don't have a pixel control. Maybe that would be a good idea, right? But again, I don't work for Aperture, so I don't know. But they've been hinting at it. They keep dropping these little hints in their product release videos, like what's coming next and stuff like that. And these tubes, if they are tubes, which it seems like it has to be a tube because it was lying down next to a motorcycle, like on the floor, like behind, like I guess like a lifting piece of equipment in this kind of garage thing they were in. So it kind of has to be a tube. So I'm really super excited to hear about these tubes when they come out. Maybe I'll make a video about it. Probably won't. But if I do buy them, then I would. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the lighting recommendation, I guess, is that definitely Aperture over any other company right now. I know Godox has released other versions of their, like more bright versions of their like SL60W. So they got the 100W and 150 and all these other numbers, like there's these silent ones and stuff. And I think fellow filmmaker, she did a bunch of comparisons with all those lights, so you've probably already seen them, but if not, there'll be a link to that video up here. But the prices of these units and stuff didn't really capture me. I was like, I mean, I don't really want to buy more Godox lights because they don't work with the Sidus Link. They don't work with the ecosystem that I've been buying into more. So yeah, I'm kind of locking myself into these ecosystem of Aperture, but it's a good ecosystem. It works. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Would be no more SL60W. Look into the Aperture Amaran range. Find one that you like, that fits your needs, that fits the type of work that you do, and get in on that one because you won't regret it. So we got a new camera offering from DJI, and this is a weird one, but it seems, I don't know if a lot of the YouTubers weren't being honest enough, because my reaction was totally different to all theirs. They seem to really like this the strangest, it's called the Ronin 4D, and I think it's a hideous looking thing. It looks like a swan. It looks like someone's trying to run around with a swan. I don't know if you've seen that advert with like the kind of the chicken head, and they put the camera on the chicken head, you know, because birds are very good at like having like self-stabilizing heads and stuff like that. But this kind of thing looks like a weird, like a bird without wings, and it's got like this massive neck. So that's why I think it looks like a swan or a goose or something like that. It's very, very strange. So it's maybe like 6K at the moment. It's kind of a similar like gimbal camera, similar to like the X5S that we would have on the Inspire 2 and stuff like that. But now this is called the X9, because there was the X7, which was the upgraded version of it, X5S, which had its own proprietary DJI lenses. So I think this is the X9, and I think it uses DJI lenses, but it's also E-mount. It's adaptable to go to E-mount and stuff like that, so you can use your Sony lenses on it, which is cool. I mean, it's nice to see adaptability for a company which usually wants to lock you out of third-party stuff, it seems. I mean, I guess with the X5S, you could use more micro four thirds lenses like Olympus and stuff, but it just seems when they went to the X7, it's like, oh, we got this better camera now, but you have to use our lenses, which are like all of them are $2,000 each. It was like, wow, you're really, really locking people out of that. But so I think it's 6K at the moment, with an upgrade or a new version maybe to 8K in the future. But it's this crazy looking thing. Looks like a giant bird, and it's going to be like four axes of stabilization. So you've got the gimbal get the gimbal part, but then you've also got this kind of up and down vertical kind of stabilizer. And yeah, I don't know. Some of the footage from the reviewers was good, but a lot of it kind of just looked like over sharpened, kind of drone style things, like someone running around with the drone. So personally, I wasn't very impressed with it, but there were some cool like examples. So Make Art Now. So Josh Yo made fantastic video, which he came out later. I kind of don't like it when these embargoes end and everyone just kind of uploads videos at the same time. It's kind of like, it's too much at once, but there are a few people who kind of hold back a bit, and Josh was one of those people, and his video was really, really good because it wasn't just like a manual read. It wasn't like, here's all the specs, blah, blah, here's what I think about it. He made something with it. He made some art with it. It's amazing. He got like Aston Martins involved. He got this really cool room, which kind of like, the Dark Knight kind of stuff, like Batman stuff. It's fantastic stuff. But he did pin a comment talking about some of the issues with the footage and stuff that I definitely noticed there was issues with the footage, but he says it might have been a workflow thing on his end rather than a problem with the product. But I've noticed this before, especially with drones or like the X5S and stuff. Like sometimes you're filming at a certain frame rate, but it will look like kind of choppy or weird, or like the motion blur is weird. It's kind of strange. But in some of his shots, there was like weird like ghosting and things like that I noticed. Or I don't know if he was tracking or reframing inside inside some of the stuff that was shot with the camera, but like I just noticed these problems. So I was like, again, not so impressed, but maybe these are firmware issues, who knows? Or maybe it was a workflow issue for him. Again, unconfirmed, but maybe he'll, I think he said he was going to update us on that in a further review video from him. So if you haven't seen this video, go check it out. It's fantastic. It'll be up here as well. Really, really cool. Like that, it definitely showed the better use cases of that kind of system, like putting it on a drone, putting it on a car mount, because it has all the axis stabilizations, right? So you don't need like a massive like Russian arm or like other things on the back of a vehicle to help stabilize the camera vertically. Like a cloud mount. There we go. That's what I'm thinking. A cloud mount is kind of built into systems. So it's cool, right? But I just wouldn't want to run around with one of those things. Just looks a bit ridiculous. Like having a huge rig is already like attracts attention from other people about what you're doing. But imagine trying to run around with something that was like a mechanical bird. Yeah, not too interested in that. But DJI, if you're listening, please feel free to send me some stuff to review. I don't mind reviewing stuff. But yeah, so that was a lot of stuff that came out. What else did we have? Deity. So Aperture's kind of sister company, which deals with sound, brought out with this new little Deity kind of pocket wireless system thing. Basically like a Rode Wireless Go, but a bit taller, a bit longer, and it has some compatibility with their other product. But it still has the same issues as the wireless Go. You get your body in the way, signal drops. You walk too far away, signal starts cutting out. So I can only imagine, because a lot of these reviewers, they just go outside to these kind of areas. Like, I'm going to walk out in the road. I'm going to walk down the road and see how far I can get or whatever. And it's like, that's great. And I'm sure that's great for some applications. But can you show me what it's like in a conference with like huge amounts of Wi-Fi interference or something? Because those are the situations that is the worst. And this is why I hate my wireless Goes, because I was in a studio with someone, and I guess there was an office below us or above us, or maybe even both. Or maybe there was a really powerful router like on the same floor as us. But even like literally the distance between the receiver and the transmitter was less than 2 meters. Direct line of sight. It was cutting out constantly, and it's like ridiculous. Like how can the system be so bad? So it's just like I'm very, very put off with this kind of digital systems, all these very weak digital systems that are coming out. I definitely wouldn't want to even test a different company system, which is similar to the wireless Go, without some assurances that it's going to work properly in these situations, because I just can't deal with it. Like I'd rather just go back to radio, to the more analog kind of systems, the analog transmitters and stuff. Like what's it called, the Rode Filmmaker kit. I'd rather go back to one of them because yeah, there might be like static and stuff sometimes, but I'd rather have static than you know what I mean? Because once you lose the audio there, it's just gone, right? It's really, really annoying. So I guess these little small transmitter packs, am I ranting right now? I feel like I'm ranting. I wish they just had more output or more power or a better connection or something like that. I don't see why they should be cutting out like that. You know, surely there's some improvements that can be made to this system. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm not like a tech genius when it comes to the technology that they're using, but there must be something that can be done. But yeah, I'm not really into that like new Pocket Deity Connect thingy. I'd rather get the wireless Go 2 because it has the internal recording. That's probably what I would go for if I was going to get more. Otherwise, I would rather spend thousands of dollars on a different brand, which is going to give me reliability. Because trying to use these $200, $300 kits and stuff is just not reliable. They just don't work as well as they should. Like, how can a body block that much transmission when you're only like a couple of meters away? It's crazy, and it's not even like consistent. It's not even like, okay, it's behind them. There's no signal at all, right? It really varies. Like sometimes it can be completely fine, and then suddenly, randomly, the transmitter can be within line of sight. Literally, nothing's changed, and it would start cutting out. It's like, how did something change that the signal's gone? So that's a little frustration with those kits. So I'm probably not going to look into that, the Deity kit, Pocket stuff at all. I like their YouTube channel. I think they're a nice company, and they give out nice like audio tips and stuff. But in terms of the products, they need to be more exciting. They need to be more competitive with the Rode stuff to get me interested in buying their products at least. So, because if they brought out that Pocket thing and they're like, okay, we know what the wireless Go 2 can do. It does internal recording. We also do internal recording. We do all this stuff. And we're like 3 times the output or transmission power than that. That would be fantastic, but they're not. They're kind of like, it's like the same, I think, or less than, from what I can tell from the reviews I've seen. But yeah, so there we go. So covered sound. I think I've covered most of the stuff I wanted to talk about. I don't know if this was interesting for you guys to listen to. Hopefully you had fun, or hopefully you enjoyed listening to my voice ranting about this stuff. Maybe I'll do more. If you have anything that you specifically want me to talk about, any topics, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll reply or have a reply in video form for you guys. Because, you know, this could be something regular thing, maybe once a month, who knows? Maybe get some guests on to talk about certain things so it's not completely one-sided in terms of my opinion. But yeah, hope you had fun watching this or listening to it. I'm pretty sure that anyone who has watched this is already subscribed. So thanks for being subscribed. Drop a like on this video, and I'll see you in the next one.